part of founding teams, and I'm really now just focused on being a fractional marketing strategist, teammate, CMO to companies because I've noticed a lot of climate tech companies, we focus so much on the science and the product that we forget about the brand, the message part, which really needs to be baked in from day one, and it needs to be always on. It's an always on thing. So I'm really excited to talk about this with all of you.
It's amazing. Thank you, Callan. And as usual, the one thing that I told myself not to forget, I did forget, just to record the meeting. So Callan and Michaela, I'll request an offline intro piece so that I can stitch it together before I send it to everyone so they can actually see. My apologies. And before I forget the next big thing, I'm going to paste a link in the chat, which is a Slido link. It's a simple Q&A, like questions forum. It's going to be easier for us to track questions from everyone attending the meeting rather than Zoom chat. It also allows you to upvote other questions that questions from others that have come along. We asked the community, so we have got 3 questions sitting over there already. Please feel free as the session continues, and we will get to it at the end. Um, with that, moving on. So I like to start some of these events with a hot take, and I feel like hot takes are uh, because they are hot, break down the ice, but also kind of like really target an elephant in the room, so to speak. And something that's been on my mind uh, for a very long time now is actually that. And we marketers never like to admit the following that I'm about to say. Uh, that I think the climate sector, sustainability at large, but even within that, the climate sector could possibly be the sector which is worst at marketing ourselves. And it's at a time when we are trying to tell the most important story of our times. At Terra, I've spent the last several years trying to tell the story, climate stories, to alumni, net new audiences from an acquisition standpoint, uh, all trying to, like, people who care about, but they don't know where to start. And the gap I've always found where I care about climate and I'm doing something about it, it's almost always a communication failure. Yeah. So that's a hot take, and people I've seen have the motivation to do what they want to do, but they don't have a story that meets them where they are in their lives and shows them what to do next. A lot of today's conversation is going to sort of revolve around that as well. So I'll pause for a bit, let that sink in for a little, and while that happens, Michaela and Kellen, like, do you agree, disagree? What's your take? Like, are we the worst marketers or worst people to market our sector so far?
Dylan, do you
Kellen,
want
if you want to go first.
Sure, 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 sure. Um, yeah, I would say, yeah, like climate marketers and the climate community at large, I think are doing it like a disservice because we're fearful of getting it wrong, or there's so much riding on it, or the data has to be so accurate. But we
Mm,
have to remember, like, data and the transparency part of it and the science and all that, that's only like one part of the rational brain within anyone, like marketers aside. And so there's so much more like emotion and storytelling and other pieces that like we could really lean into. If all y'all know about Seth Godin, godfather of marketing, if you don't look him up, one of the things he talks about a lot, which isn't new to Silicon Valley, is like a minimum viable person, or like who's your minimal
mm,
viable audience. And I think if people in marketing, climate marketing specifically, talk about who is like the smallest group of people you can talk to and like be earnest with it, I think we could do a lot more with that. I think we're trying to
mm.
say too much to too big of an audience because we know it's a global urgent situation. And so it just gets lost in the mix. So I think, yeah, I agree and I disagree, but I think there are ways around it.
want?
Thanks, Kellen. Been forever a fan of Seth Godin and his Akimbo podcast. Just a side note, if people haven't heard it, definitely look up Akimbo. It's amazing. Michaela, please.
Yeah, I agree to the most part. I think the climate science is has taken like an approach which is very scary. So like a lot of the data that people are sharing are super overwhelming sometimes, and like it's difficult to take the action based on the data, right? So we know like we are close to the tipping point. Like sometimes it feels like there is nothing you can do to return from that path, which might be true, but I think there is a lot of things that we can do in like our daily lives, whether it's like trying to decrease your consumption, whether it's like reusing things, or whether it's like the climate job that you are doing, or just bringing the sustainability into your job that you currently have, all the paths like how you can help without focusing too much on, I don't know, like it's not me that I should be doing this thing, right? Like it should be the businesses or it should be the government. Like sometimes I feel like people are jumping into those conclusions, while I think like every individual can make an impact, and like when we all join our efforts, we will make like a huge impact collectively compared to just like one individual companies or governments.
Great perspective, Michaela. And in the chat on this other side, yes, I think the flip side of it, the good news side of it, needs to be equally told. Gives us hope. Gives us. There's a lot of talented people and orgs all over the world doing great work, and it's almost buried in the what we can potentially say as this doom washing. There is a there's a note about that. Um, Thank you. We're warming up and getting really into it. So let's talk. It's a good segue to our first segment, really, which is like communicating climate science simply, or in a way that it lands well. So I would love to know from both of you. It's like um, what's really is a great example you have seen of climate messaging or climate um, product campaign where you've seen land really well with people outside the immediate radius or the immediate MVP, as Kellen was describing it, and still made it work. It's like, what's that urgency that can take people? How do you communicate urgency without tapping into doom all the time? Would love to hear Michaela, and
Yeah.
and I think Kellen will have some interesting perspectives around some of the areas we'll dive into that. Michaela.
Yeah, so I think like something that we are often missing when we are talking about sustainability and climate change is that connection to like real people, and like how does it translate into their real lives, right? So we know like the planet is warming up and all of that, but it's something that people are not thinking about every day, or like it's in the back of their head, but like the biggest issues that they have is like, oh, like the price of gas is going up, right? Like how will I don't know, have like 3 meals a day for my family, and like how do I keep my job? Like AI is a threat, right? So like all of those like things are on top of mind, just like trying to survive in this economy is, and like we need to make that connection of like, okay, this is what we are doing, and like how do we translate that into people's everyday lives? And I will give an example of clean energy because that's the industry where I work at. And I found that, for example, like BC Hydro. So I'm a consultant at BC Hydro, so please don't take any of my words like as a representation of BC Hydro. But I feel like BC Hydro is doing this very well in a sense that they translate the things into people's everyday lives, right? So instead of saying, or like decrease your carbon footprint by X or save as much CO2, right? Like they are not using those words. They're saying, okay, like decrease your consumption of energy, or like how can you decrease your bill of utility bill, right? Things like that. And they also work not only with like individuals and like households, but also with like different businesses or community champions in the whole BC, and like they highlight those examples of like electrification, right? So, or they highlight the examples of like how certain companies were able to decrease their energy consumption by X and things like that. And also like when I was at EV Energy, the message that we were trying to communicate, yes, like you are trying to optimize your EV charging, but at the same time, the biggest benefit for you is going to save you money, right? So if there is like a benefit like saving money, saving time, or like improving anything in my world that's tangible, I think that's the way we should connect the climate message with with the non-technical audience. What do you think, Helen?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think we balance urgency and action. I mean, going back to what I just said about, knowing your minimal, like viable audience and like being really specific. In marketing, we call this segmentation, right? Like who is this small subset of a group within the bigger audience that you could really be specific and talk to. I think a lot of greenwashing, a lot of urgency is lost because we're just too vague and it's too like up here that we're talking about things. And the further we drill down and we get into like the culture and the specific messaging within a group, within an audience, it goes a lot further. Okay, so when I was at the prefab home company that I was working with out of California, through all the research I did, I found a lot of people just like weren't understanding what the benefits of prefab homes were, right? Like we could talk about all the millions of tons of CO2 and lumber and excess material that's used by building it efficiently in a warehouse using precise measurements and yada yada yada. But that was always lost on people, right? It doesn't matter how much money it saved, how much time, or how much material and resources was saved. It never was landing with people. And it wasn't even once I reached the company and they still wanted to project that message. So I moved to a completely different new brand message, which was that prefab homes are resilient homes. And resilient immediately means something different to you. Oh, it stands up in a country, a state like California, which is severe drought and fires. Resilient matters to them, right? Okay, so what about a home makes it resilient? And so you open up this new dialogue because you're speaking a little bit of a different language in a different way to people, and then it opens up the other things that you can talk about. So, to give you a practical advice and something you could walk away with this is like I often think about like what's the problem behind the problem. So the problem of like a shortage of housing wasn't that they're not being built fast enough, even though everyone thinks that's what it is, and that's what they think the benefit of prefab homes were. I thought the problem behind the problem was we really need to talk about resilient homes that can last in a forest fire, that can, survive in a category storm, that a home that you don't have to spend your weekends maintaining and repainting because it's so strong. So once we added that new messaging of resiliency, it affected everything, our webinars, our emails, our social media, our investor conversations, everything. And then it opened up a whole new dialogue with people and a lot more engagement than we'd ever seen before.
Yeah. Thanks, Colin and Michaela. I think these are amazing perspectives. And interestingly, and we'll share this at the end of the call, so do stick around. Um, uh, there's something that we teach at Terra Studio, which is another course we can talk about at another time. But what's interesting is that we talk about two core concepts. The first is called the story spine, and the second is called the value framing or distance gapping. And give a very uh, quick overview of it. The story spine is a good story lands when because we are wired right from our childhood, once upon a time. So something uh, happens every day, and then something happened that caused the next thing to happen, till the people in the story, the characters in the story, they do something about that, which leads to the last bit. And we are wired to understand our world in that fashion. And when we as marketers create campaigns which follows this spine format, we have found it always lands and sticks with the audience because they can correlate and they can connect through that spine form. The next bit is like the value framing and distance mapping. This is a great example that both Michaela and Kellen you shared is that, hey, all of this is happening around us. I do care. I'm not talking about the audience who's like, yeah, I don't care. So what? I do care, but do I care enough to make fundamental changes or do specific things which are very core to me and my family, or my immediate friends and family? And that's where you need to close gaps, and gaps are of various kinds. Like there's the geographical gap. Okay, something's happening in another part of the world. There's been a flood, so bring it down to your place. And there's also this fact fad. Okay, great. 1.5 degrees C. How does that translate to me today, tomorrow? What happens to my neighborhood? What happens to me? How does it affect my everyday life? So there's a cool artifact that we'll share at the end of the call, which kind of summarizes all of this. Um, it's worth looking into. Thanks for that. And by the way, like there's a great link shared by Julio in the chat. If you folks haven't, it deals with and thanks Julio for sharing that. And I think it's so pertinent to today's call. And it's a podcast link, and the title goes like the number one problem is that nobody has painted the positive story of what our everyday lives would or could look like when it's run on fossil fuels. And such an amazing perspective. There's a link in the chat, but I'll also share it out in the email that goes out so you folks can listen to it after. So don't have to go hunting in the chat, but it's a good one. Thanks again for sharing. Um, yeah, the moving on. I think while positive storytelling is not done nearly enough, um, the tension point still remains that how do we do green branding, green trust building without getting into the washing part? Because there's some form of skepticism. I think this group is the most skeptic group because we tell the story, so we know exactly how the story is being spun, often behind the screen scenes. So I would love to pick your brains, Michaela and Kellen, around some of these. And as I was researching what BC Hydro is doing and what Kellen you have worked on in the past, I have some specific questions for you folks. We're getting great questions on Slido, by the way, so folks, please keep that rolling. It's amazing. So the question, and maybe Michaela will start with you, and not to put you in any spot, like swap out BC Hydro with any clean energy. I think, but this is a pertinent topic over here. Uh, I would say BC Hydro is arguably like one of the cleanest energy companies that I've known around. But overall, we haven't transitioned into it. We are trying to get to where we want to get to. But it's such a great example of a company which is in the crosshair of exactly what we're discussing and scrutiny and all of that. At what point, do you feel like does a company or a brand quote unquote earn the right to tell its sustainability story? Even if it's not squarely in the sustainability space, because everybody has to make that change today if we want to save the planet, right? So, what's your perspective on that? Would love to hear.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm like super lucky to work for BC Hydro at the moment because like they are like one of the cleanest energy companies, as you mentioned. Like it's 100% hydrogen generated energy, so it is sustainable, and we are lucky in BC that we have access to so much energy because not everybody has that luck, right? And like It's just that we have these resources here. Uh, and because of that, and also because it is affordable for the community in BC, so it's like one of the most affordable energies. Like so I am originally from Slovakia, and like if I talk to my friends and family like back in Europe, like their energy prices are multiple times higher than they are here in BC. And I think it's that affordability and the focus on community, as well as the clean energy all together, that's creating like BC Hydro to be a love brand in BC. So like everybody who I'm speaking to like love BC Hydro, and they're just like very open, which is not usually the case for utilities, right? So I've been working with like other utilities in not in the clean energy space, but always in the EV space that don't have such a great image in the community. And I also want to say, even though like these factors are playing in the way that's like easier perhaps maybe for BC Hydro to sell themselves as the good energy company, it's not, I don't think it's an accident. So there is like the whole team focusing on how do we connect to the community? What are some of the people that we can highlight in the BC? So they have the whole program for like that's called Power Smart Champions, that are like individuals and industry leaders and companies that can participate in this program and like work directly with BC Hydro. So I think they could have just said, oh, like we're already the cleanest energy company, we don't need to do anything. But I think that's not true. Like they are really putting a lot of effort into marketing and branding themselves. I think another thing they are doing really well, in my opinion, is like using humor, so in their like social media, and like they're not this like stiff energy company that's like shying away from people. They're actually like going out like with super like fun campaigns and just like trying to connect with people in like different ways that I have seen like in other energy companies doing.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing, Kara. If you don't mind to, and Karen, feel free to jump in as well.
Mhm.
Um, there's I think there's a difference when a company or a product that you are marketing is already sits in the sweet spot of
Mhm.
working, either being sustainability or green forward, or directly working in it. It's a separate set of problems to solve, but at least one area is, I wouldn't say solved already, but easier. You're not convincing that, hey. Um, but it makes me wonder, it's like there's a difference between greenwashing and telling an honest story about progress. But where is the line? Does effort count? Because um, few of the brands that at least I have worked on, and they have the sustainability department, which is so important. It helps them save money, yes, but not always is it only about saving the money. And there is actual work being done by the sustainability department, by the chief sustainability officer and their team in a completely non-climate, non-sustainability, non-energy related business. So how do we tell that story? Or do you have examples of that you have seen in the wild? Would love to know that.
Yeah, here so I live in Vancouver, Canada, right? And um, BC is very clean, but you look into Alberta, which is like oil and gas,
Mm.
like the biggest one in Canada, and it's like very different story there. Um, but even in BC, like not every company here is clean, right? So for example, like we have here I want to give an example that of BC ferries here in BC. Like they are still so they run on like gas, right? Natural gas, which is cleaner than diesel, right? So like most big ferries on like big ships like run on diesel. And a couple of years ago, they had a branding campaign, which was like all green and like how BC ferries are super green. And then I don't think that's the right thing to say it. I think we should still be honest in the way that we are marketing. Like even if it's clean, I think they should have said like it's still like fossil fuel and like it's still polluting. It's not saving us in any way here in BC, but they did this like campaign and it really backfired on them because like a lot of people picked it up and just say, oh no, like it's gas is not clean. You cannot be saying this. So they had a lot of um, activists going to them and just saying like you have to take it down, like you cannot be claiming this. So there was like a
Mhm.
greenwashing going on there. And I think like other companies, like oil and gas in Canada also are trying to say like how sustainable they are, but they're not doing it right. I think they should be saying like they are taking efforts to be cleaner, and I think they should still have sustainability apartment and like they should keep their sustainability apartment. They should take them seriously. And I know like a couple of folks that work with them. They're in the climate space. And I think like we as a climate community should still work with companies. They're not clean and like help them. Like how can they be more sustainable? And like, yes, like they will probably not be 100% sustainable ever, but how
Yeah.
can we minimize the impact they're making on the world? And like having like Canadian companies, oil and gas, like be there and like trying to say that they are sustainable and like making true efforts compared to like others that don't really care. I think it still counts.
Thanks, Michaela. Quickly before I jump onto calendar, it's like a great perspective. When we launched the Terra.do climate job board, which went on to become one of the largest climate job boards in the world, we had a real question to answer, and to date, we still have people disagreeing with us, and for good reason. It was like, hey, what about effort? Where does effort start counting? And do we list only jobs from pure sustainability companies, or are we okay with listing jobs from non-sustainability companies? What about oil and gas companies, which have a sustainability role or which has a transition role? And we talked to our community, we ran polls, we actually had full-on conversations, and ultimately we decided that progress matters no matter what. And we decided to list them. And we still have very angry emails come our way from every now and then. It was like, this is not a thing. It should not be on the Terra.do job board. This is not. And we do agree with their perspective, but I do agree with you as well that I think honest uh, effort counts. And this is true with any marketing. People connect with the journey and the effort and that what goes into it. Kellen, would love to hear your perspective, please.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of power there's a lot of power in the journey, like what you're talking about, and what that means practically, especially with what's popular right now on social media and marketing, is this idea of like behind the scenes BTS or like building in public. And what this really means is like you're a brand. I would set up a unique new Instagram account that's all about like the clean efforts and the progress you're going to make towards like cleaning and greening your company, and then having someone on your team just like repeatedly film every day about like, okay, here we're gonna do a life cycle assessment test today. Oh shit, we failed it. You know, we're at like 25% when we need to be 75%. Here are the next three things that we can do. So I think like this idea of honesty and transparency is like an overused term. It's a bit of like virtue signaling when saying it, but I think what it means practically is what social media is meant to do, which is like being a part of the conversation. So if you're being a part of the conversation, it means you're building in public and it means you're telling people about the progress you're making. And to your point, Bodhi, I think any progress is good progress, even if it's an oil and gas company, because we have to remember like the light bulb was made by candlelight. So, like, electricity was created while we were still using inferior technologies. And so, this is going to be a constant thing that happens is that we have to make progress while still using old, dirty practices. And that's just the reality of the situation of the supply chain. So like let me paint this in another picture. So on running shoes, ON have become really popular. I think they're based out of Europe, maybe Sweden or somewhere. And they have really helped reignite this idea of like running again and getting into like a running group. And one thing that they did from the beginning was talk about like recycling their shoes. And so they did this huge campaign for recycling their shoes. And it turns out that they were never actually like sending them anywhere. People sent them back to On, but they weren't sending them to a manufacturer to recycle. They weren't really doing anything with them. They're just being filled in a space of a warehouse. And so like one part is like yes they were doing the right thing and like saying they would do it, but the second part was they weren't rooting their strategy in reality, which is a lot of recycling doesn't actually have a supply chain and methods yet, right? Like to break down a shoe that has like 30 unique components of petrochemicals within it is really hard, nearly impossible. So like they could have been honest about that. They could have said, "Hey, we're going to keep these and we're going to pay the warehousing cost for the next 10 years if it takes until we find a way to break it down. But here are the steps we're taking. And you know what? We're first going to take all the shoelaces out of the shoes and we're going to recycle those, right? Like they could have been more upfront and transparent about the supply chain rather than the top message, which is we're just going to recycle. So I think there's value in being honest and transparent, but I think it gets back to my earlier points. You got to be really specific and really targeted about what you're going to do and being okay with any backlash you get because there'll be learnings in those backlashes. Go through the comments, read the feedback, figure out who knows something that you don't, and then just work on it.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I think it's an interesting segue. And to stay on the topic for just a little longer, there's a great comment in the chat about, no circularity in a particular company who was selling one piece of their huge product lineup or supply chain, which is bamboo made. And you ride so high on that. At the same time, I just remember something came up on my YouTube the other day, is like how this um, chain of Asian rest, an Asian restaurant chain decided that it's done with plastic chopsticks and things, and would go for bamboo made only, which is incredibly expensive in this part of the world. So they partnered with of course, a manufacturing hub out of China, which is great, fine. But what was happening is a lot of times the ones that were there unused, or there was a breakage in their supply chain management, where there were like hundreds of thousands of these bamboo chopsticks which were not reaching the restaurant chain, and it was too expensive for the manufacturer to route it back to their warehouses, so it just went away nowhere. So it's just sat there, and the packaging is not made of bamboo. The shipping is not uh, green. So the perspective is real. And to stay on that point and maybe push a little further, Kevin, specifically, like being very, since you have marketed so much into the lived experience in the materials world. When a product is physical, it's tangible, it's sitting in someone's home. Does that make, from your point of view, the sustainability claim either easier to prove or harder to hide from as a brand?
Yeah, I mean, great question. Easier to prove or harder to hide from. Yeah, I mean, yes, and yes. It's both. Like with the homes that I've helped sell, with the dye company that I've been a part of, and fashion and sustainable fashion and cosmetics. I think you definitely have more of a spotlight, so it gives you a place to talk about it more quickly. I think it instead of it being like a data point or a piece of a message within your marketing that says, "Hey, we're sustainable," or "We save this much," which only really like computes to like the rational mind, which is usually sometimes like your early adopters. I think having physical products gives you a place to just like hold people's attention and you can really drill down on your sustainability claims. So, for example, with the prefab homes that we were working with, I was working with, we had like an entire page dedicated to like the sustainability claims. Um, but it was also just like a running theme where like it was part of your signature within the company. Every time you sent an email, it was like a link to the page to like, hey, go check out our sustainability claims. We mentioned it almost every time we were in webinars. And I think the repetition of it allowed people to understand that we weren't hiding from it. It wasn't part of the main message, but being upfront about these are the claims that we are working on that we've successfully met, I think just gives people like a place to understand that like this is where we're coming from rather than we're trying to project really good places of a product that we can go and we're being fake about it and it's gonna take 5 or 10 years to get there. We were always using it in the present tense. Like this is what we're doing. This is the chemicals we're using and not using. So I think it just gives you a place. When you have like a real physical product, it just gives you a chance to talk about it and you shouldn't shy away from it. I think is really the best way to answer that. Um, just don't, go overboard talking about how important this one thing is and don't exaggerate it or climate catastrophize it. I think we just need to talk about it in just a real world sense. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
thanks. And just to add to that, I think the technology, the science, it's evolving. We've got very smart people working on these problems every day, and as things become more accessible, the fact that it's sustainable actually lends into the product or the service actually being good overall, minus from the perspective, something you mentioned earlier on, not just as green. So embrace that, and the fact that it's also green doesn't need to be hidden by any means. But you don't need to push that, okay, buy this because it's green. Buy this because it's good for you and it's green and for the planet. So great points. Thank you. Um, Circling on, and I'm seeing some of the questions coming in on Slido, which kind of rhymes well with the next segment. It's like the campaigns that move people. When you're marketing something like an EV charging network, and cue on to you, Michaela, or a sustainable home, you're asking people to change how they live. So that's a big multi-stage campaign. And many of the things that we push as marketers in the green space, in the climate space today, are not necessarily a quick choice item. It's a multi-stage problem that we are solving at existential level, sometimes at very, very deep levels. So how do you build a campaign around behavioral change that big? Michaela, when we were like chatting the other day, we were talking about having EV cars, and it's not just going in and, oh, this happens to be a cheaper car. There's a lot of other perspectives. So would love to hear your perspective, especially from the EV charging perspective, because you've been so deep into it. Maybe take that example. Would love to know.
Yeah, so EV charging or like EV cars in general, I think that's a good example because it's a newish technology, right, on the market. Like it's been here for, I would say, like 10 years or so. It's not as deep as like some of like the other products on the market. And I think there is like a curve, right? So like anytime there is like a new technology on the market, or whether it's not only EVs but also like heat pumps and things like that, like you will initially get like a boost, right? So you'll get a lot of interest like from people in like the sustainability market, and um, those like early adopters will get on it, and it doesn't matter like how much it costs, they will just like buy it because it's like a new technology and they are really into it. But then it takes a lot of time to become widespread and like mass market. So I think like in the EV industry, like what I've been seeing is um I think like making sure that it is on par with the gas cars on like the price point is important. So like I liked like the way that governments like stepped in and they put like rebates in. I think they helped tremendously. Um, Unfortunately, in Canada, like we stepped away from it and like took away some of those. So I feel like the world is changing in a not a great way, like taking away like all of those incentives that were helping like those other people who could not afford like super high cost of those EVs. So like those additional incentives like help them to decrease the initial cost and was there to help people buy it, right? Like even if they didn't have the money to buy the full price. So I think that helped tremendously to scale EV charging. So for example, like in Canada, like there is currently like 1 million EVs on the road, which is around like 5%, which is still like super low, right? But at the same time, I think there is a lot of marketing and like there is interest in EVs, but there are like so many different factors playing into it. I think in BC, for example, it's like the energy is like very affordable. So many people are switching into EVs because it's cheaper than a gas, right? Like that's why. The main reason it's not so in the beginning you have a lot of people who will join for the sustainability reason, but as you move further to like bigger groups, they will join for other reason than the sustainability, right? I think I really love the word, Kellen, you mentioned, like resilient homes, the resiliency and like just diving deeper, like what are people like what are other reasons why people will buy into it is like super important for the climate or like any sustainable products, EV charging included.
Thanks, Michaela. Kellen, would love to hear your perspective as well.
Yeah, I think when it comes to adoption and really getting people to pay attention, there's like one of the big tenets of marketing is like you're basically trying to get someone to do something they're already doing just a little bit different. And so if you look at like EV cars, that was a hard decision in the beginning because there wasn't an infrastructure for it. But while Tesla, Elon aside, while he was building cars, he secretly built superchargers all around the country, North America, I should say specifically. And then when he told everyone that, they're like, oh, that makes the decision so much easier. Now I can go between two big cities and charge at a supercharger along the way. So the infrastructure was needed to make it the decision easier. And so if we back up and we look at like a non-climate company and we think about how this relates to like marketing and product adoption. So some of you may have heard of Liquid Death. Liquid Death is a company that sells water in a can. Okay. Really cool company. A bunch of people have heard about it because of its crazy marketing. That's really cool, but I bet you didn't know that its second tagline, like its secondary mission, is to like be the death to plastic. Okay, death to plastic. So they say we're liquid death. We're gonna murder your thirst, which is like quench your thirst, which is a really cool play on words. But their secondary tagline is death to plastic, and they use aluminum cans. They've always used aluminum cans. They'll never change from that. And say what you want about it, it's still a recyclable product. It's almost, I think, infinitely recyclable because it's aluminum. So they've made the adoption of their product really, really freaking easy because it's not asking you to carry a 3 liter container, reusable container that no one wants to carry around at a festival, right? It's not asking you to like buy another tote bag or like another reusable bottle. It's just saying, hey, when you're at the store, when you're at a concert, when you're at a rave or whatever, instead of getting like your beer or whatever or plastic bottle, just buy a really cool can and hold a really cool can while drinking water, right? And you still look like a cool person, you're still helping in the environment. So like there's a lot of different ways we can pick that apart, but I think the essence is like you need to give people an easy way to adopt your product or like an easy way to think about using your product. And so we don't need to like talk about how big and revolutionary this like green product is going to be or sustainable. Sometimes we just need to talk about like the really small thing. Yes, thank you, Lucille. Like the real easy way to like make people transition from one thing to another. And like I guarantee you, most of the people that drink liquid death don't actually know about its environmental mission, but when you bring it up, it'll just make sense to them and they'll feel good about it. And there's a bit of absolution in this, right? Because that's like the secondary emotional feeling that people are trying to like quench is not just like doing good physically, but it's this emotional feeling of like absolution. Like we've all been guilty of propping up the climate change and the crisis, but like what are the small things we can do to like feel good about making small changes? And liquid death is one of those things. It's just like I'm going to drink water, it's going to be in a cool can and it's aluminum and it's easy to recycle. I don't have to think anything about that.
Thank you. Yeah, Karen Michaela, I think driving home, and if I were to bring both your perspectives into one, um, making big behavioral changes it's a multi-step process, right? And you're going to meet different parts of your audience at different steps of that process. Um, you're going to meet people who are the early adopters who are into the mission, into the product for the mission of it. And that's say the early adopters of green vehicles, even though it was more expensive. And there too, to Kellen's point, it's not just a green vehicle, it's a tech forward vehicle. It's a design departure, it's futuristic. So you are packaging thing, that product, to not just tickle one part of your psyche, but multiple parts of it. And we as marketers, I feel like in the climate space, we always feel compelled to tell the climate story, to tell the sustainability story, the green angle, which is great, but is it always required? And I think I would ask myself that question, and each of us should, when we create a new campaign, we create a new brand strategy, or even an email subject line for that matter, is like, um, is there anywhere else I could meet the audience that would make it more personable? And that's such a critical question to answer, I feel. Um, I think we're coming up on time, and it's a great time to segue to some of the questions that we have had. So I'm just opening up Slido on the screen. Let me refresh so I make sure I have all the latest questions in. It's been great so far. Okay, so I'll go with highest voted first because you can vote up questions. I feel like a number of these we have covered very specifically during the call. To just save up on the time, I'll just skip through some of them, even if they are technically the most upvoted ones. Um, One of them is, do you ever feel like you are preaching to the choir? Like the people who see your content, already care about climate, and the ones who don't never will. And we cycle through because through Michaela, if you want to go first, do you see that happening in your line of work, and how do you get past that?
Yeah, like to some extent, yes, but I think like what we've been discussing, it's like thinking about like the other elements, like other selling points and like values that your product is offering to the market is speaking to like the broader community that's not only focusing on the climate, but I think like another aspect on this is and like something that makes me really sad is like there will still be people who don't care about climate and like I've been like discussing this a lot because like even in my like family or like friends group there are people who are still against climate or like they don't think it's real and things like this which like on one hand, I want to argue with them and I want to persuade them and like I want to like put all of these facts in there, like, or like there is like people like scientists like working on this, like it is real. But at the same time, I also found like when I am trying to do this, they have like counter arguments against
Mm,
it, and they are prepared. Like they've done their I don't want to say like fake, but like they've done their research, and it's like super hard to argue with them. So instead of trying to persuade them, or like, I think there will always be people who are like, oh, I will never have an EV, like never, right? So, and then maybe they will never have an EV and will be the last one with the gas car. But instead of focusing on those and like putting a lot of like precious energy that we have in ourselves on persuading those people, I would rather spend it on people who care about the climate and like don't know what to do, or don't know like what they can do, not only in their like daily lives but like other areas. Or I will like try to focus on them and help them to stay focused, because it's sometimes like very difficult to stay focused. Like even when I was like looking for jobs, I had like moments that like, okay, like I will not be able to find a climate job, right? So, and like it's okay, like there are like, even if you're not working in climate and like trying to go there, there are other areas where you can focus on like climate, like in your free time at your home, or like other areas. So yes, like sometimes it feels like preaching to the choir, but I don't feel that when I think it's the energy well spent on those people that care, compared to the ones that are like, no, I don't want to deal with this.
right. Yeah, it's thank you, Michaela. What brings to mind is caranddriver.com, for people who are in the market for buying cars or just like cars in general. And they released this what I would say the Oscars of the automobile in the written world, at least, and it's like the best car in this category, in that category, whatever have you. And there would always be this separate EV category. Right? It's almost like, okay, it doesn't matter. It's a fuel type or transmission type. Then they don't have dedicated automatic cars versus manual transmission cars, just cars. So why do that? And interestingly, only now I'm seeing that the Rivian, the electric vehicle company, their R1, one of their models is the best family size SUV. Uh, it just happens to be electric. That's not important. It's the best family size SUV. Great. Let's do it. Great point. Thank you, Mika. I'll move on to next question actually, and I will point that to Kellen for your perspective because I feel like so here the question I was like, what type of consumer conversations do you think brands should have about climate that most are not doing or discussing with their audience today?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get too general on that. I think the type of conversations as consumers you want to have with with the consumers from a brand perspective are the ones that make sense to your brand. You know, are you changing like the end product? Are you changing something from plastic to like a new biomaterial that needs to be biofabricated? I think the conversations that you need to have with consumers about your brand are um, like truthfully, like the supply chain just isn't ready for a lot of the clean technologies or the clean transition. So there's a lot within the supply chain that needs to change. The thing that I think a lot of people aren't talking about is most consumers don't actually care about green products. I know we all say that this is a hot take, but when you're faced with it and when you're alone and you're looking at your phone at night or whatever, I think truthfully most people don't truly on the surface care about like a green product versus a non-green product because there's not an easy transition, because they don't know how it's going to affect your life. So I think the conversations you need to have is, hey, this isn't going to work for everyone. This isn't going to change tomorrow. We're not going to solve the tipping point tomorrow with this product, but it's one thing that we can try to make an effort on. And I'm just going to focus on kitchen utensils. I'm just going to focus on this manufacturer. I think we just have to get very specific, um, and know that you can't fix everything.
Thank you, Calvin. Very, very well said. And I like how we started with one hot take and we're concluding with another. We are on time, so I'll just do a quick wrap and we'll follow up as well. Before anything, I just want to thank each and every one of you. I love running these in climate X and in climate marketing specific events because um, is just who I am, and I can see the type of questions and the energy in the questions that come along, that we love our craft. It's not the easiest. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all your questions, but at the end of the day, we like telling stories. We like taking things to the people and making them see our perspective. And it's a very interesting, be it exhausting profession to be in, especially in these sort of times. So I appreciate all your times. Um, Michaela, myself, and Kellen will try to go through all your questions async separately. Do expect a recording link with answers to some of these questions that we may get to. Um, We'll also share a little toolkit which revolves around all these things that we discussed. And so you can apply it in your line of work as well. Hopefully, you find that helpful. As always, Killen and as I said, Killen and Michaela are from the Terra.do Learning for Action Climate Fellowship. And through their generosity, I'll be happy to share a special link to the course if you are interested in learning more about climate and actually actioning it. That's a fantastic course to take, and there'll be a special discount for that as well. We'll have many more of these events. There are several others coming up, as I mentioned. We'd love to see many of you come join us again and have some coffee or your favorite beverage. And until next time, thank you again so much, Michaela and Kellen. It's been a pleasure hosting you both. And thanks for everyone. Have a good
My
one.
pleasure. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye.